Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. When my wife of 15 years walked into the kitchen on a quiet Tuesday evening and announced that she was done with our marriage, I surprised both of us by simply smiling and continuing to clear the dinner dishes. It wasn't a smile of happiness or relief, but rather the quiet acknowledgement of something I had seen coming for months. While she had expected tears, arguments, or desperate pleas for reconciliation, I had already spent the better part of a year emotionally preparing for exactly this moment. Allison and I had been married for many years. In our early years of our union, we connected over our shared goals of building stable careers and starting a family together. The first decade of our marriage had been everything I hoped a partnership could be. We supported each other through job changes and family challenges, bought our first house, and welcomed 2 children who became the center of our world. Our son, Michael, was now 13 and our daughter, Scarlett, was 10. I had been the primary breadwinner throughout our marriage, working long hours as a structural engineer at a firm that specialized in commercial construction projects. The demanding schedule was worth it because my salary allowed Allison to stay home with the children during their early years, something we had both agreed was important for their development. The arrangement had worked well for over a decade, with Allison managing our household and childcare responsibilities while I focused on advancing my career and ensuring our financial security. We had settled into comfortable routines that allowed both of us to contribute to our family in ways that matched our strengths and preferences. I handled the financial planning and home maintenance, while Allison took care of meal planning, school activities, and the countless daily tasks that kept our household running smoothly. However, about 2 years ago, Allison had decided that she wanted to return to the workforce. She found a position as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized advertising agency. Initially, I was supportive of her desire to rebuild her professional identity after years of focusing on our family. I thought having her own career again would make Allison feel more fulfilled and give her a sense of purpose beyond our domestic responsibilities. However, the changes in Allison's behavior since starting her new job had been subtle at first, but increasingly concerning as the months progressed. She seemed to throw herself into her work with an intensity that felt disproportionate to what should have been an entry-level position at a company where she was just getting re-established in her field. She would spend evenings on her laptop, claiming to be working on pending projects she couldn't finish at the office or responding to urgent emails. Allison's investment in her new job began to overshadow her engagement with our family life in ways that created noticeable tension in our daily routines. She would arrive home from work distracted and preoccupied, often needing time to decompress before she could focus on conversations with me or the children. Family dinners became quieter affairs, where Allison would seem mentally absent, responding to questions with brief answers before returning her attention to her phone. The physical distance between us had also increased significantly over the past several months. Allison began avoiding intimacy, claiming to be too tired sometimes and not in the mood. She would go to bed earlier than usual or stay up later than I, creating schedules that minimized our opportunities for private time together. When I tried to address these changes or suggest that we needed to prioritize our relationship alongside her career development, Allison would dismiss my concerns by saying she was just adjusting to the demands of working again. Allison's constant attention to her phone had become particularly noticeable during family time. Even when she agreed to spend time with us, she would respond to calls during weekend activities and spend significant portions of our evenings scrolling through what she claimed were work-related communications. When I asked about the necessity of being so available to her colleagues outside of business hours, Allison would explain that the marketing industry required quick responses and that she was still proving herself at her new company. The emotional distance that had developed between Allison and me over the past year had been difficult to ignore, but I found myself making excuses for her behavior rather than confronting what was becoming an obvious pattern. I told myself that returning to work after more than a decade at home was probably more stressful than I could understand, and that Allison needed time to find a balance between her professional and family responsibilities. But as the months go by, it has become clear that Allison's changed behavior wasn't a temporary adjustment period, but a fundamental shift in her priorities and attention. The coldness in Allison's responses to my attempts at connection had become impossible to dismiss as work-related stress. She would respond to my questions about her day with minimal details, show little interest in my work or concerns, and seem relieved when our conversations were interrupted by the children's needs or household tasks that required his attention. I began to feel like I was living with a polite stranger who was going through the motions of family life without any genuine engagement or affection. During this period of growing distance in our marriage, I had started seeking help to understand what was happening and how I might address the problems I was seeing. I began seeing a therapist who specialized in marriage and family issues, initially hoping to gain insights that might help me reconnect with Allison and restore the intimacy we had lost. Through my sessions with the therapist, I began to understand that the changes in Allison's behavior were likely signs of deeper issues in our marriage that went beyond work-related stress. She helped me recognize that I had been making most of the effort to maintain our connection, planning activities, initiating conversations, and trying to address problems, while Allison remained passive and disengaged. The therapist introduced me to concepts about emotional availability and attachment styles that helped me understand what was happening in our relationship. She explained that some people withdraw emotionally when they feel conflicted about their commitments, creating distance as a way of avoiding difficult conversations or decisions. This pattern often accelerates when someone is investing emotional energy elsewhere, whether in work, friendships, or other relationships. During one particularly enlightening session, the therapist asked me to describe a typical day in our household, paying attention to the quality of interactions rather than just the logistics of family life. As I walked through our routines, I realized how superficial most of my conversations with Allison had become. We could manage an entire day together while barely connecting on any meaningful level. The therapist encouraged me to start journaling about my feelings and observations regarding our marriage, which helped me see patterns in Allison's behavior that I had been minimizing or rationalizing. The journal entries revealed that Allison had been pulling away from our relationship for much longer than I had consciously acknowledged, and that my attempts to bridge the growing gap between us had been met with increasing resistance and avoidance. The journaling process was particularly revealing when I started noting specific examples of Allison's disengagement rather than just general feelings about our relationship. Seeing these patterns written down made it impossible to continue denying the systematic nature of her withdrawal from our family life. Through therapy and self-reflection, I began to accept the possibility that Allison might already be emotionally checked out of our marriage, even if she hadn't explicitly said so. The therapist helped me understand that sometimes people stay in relationships out of habit or obligation rather than love and commitment, and that Allison's behavior suggested she might be going through the motions of marriage without any genuine investment in our future together. As difficult as it was to acknowledge, I began to prepare myself emotionally for the possibility that our marriage might be ending. I consulted with a family law attorney to understand what divorce proceedings would look like and how custody arrangements might work given our family situation if Allison's continued withdrawal eventually led to a formal separation. The lawyer explained the process and potential outcomes based on our financial situation and the children's ages. Having this information, I asked the lawyer to prepare the divorce papers, which took weeks to be ready. Those documents gave me a sense of control over a situation that had begun to feel completely beyond my influence. I wasn't planning to use them unless Allison forced the issue, but knowing they existed helped me feel less helpless about the direction our marriage was heading. One evening, Allison finally verbalized what I had been sensing for months, which happened during what should have been a pleasant family holiday. Both children were home from school while I had taken the day off work to spend time together as a family and enjoy each other's company. I spent the evening preparing a meal for the family, carefully setting the table. The children were excited about what I was making, and I was hopeful that the evening might remind Allison of what we had built together as a family. But when Allison came into the kitchen, her demeanor was detached and distant rather than appreciative or excited. She looked around at the table setting and the dinner I had prepared with what seemed like resignation rather than pleasure. After standing silently for several moments, Allison sighed deeply and told me that she was done with our marriage and couldn't continue pretending that everything was fine between us. She explained that she had been unhappy for a long time and that she didn't see any possibility of rebuilding the connection we had lost. Her tone was matter-of-fact rather than emotional, as if she were delivering a business report rather than ending 15 years of partnership. Instead of shock or devastation, I can't explain how I feel finally hearing Allison acknowledge what I had been observing for months. My response was to smile quietly and tell her that if that was truly what she wanted, I wouldn't try to stop her or convince her to stay in a marriage that was making her unhappy. Allison's face showed genuine surprise at my calm reaction. She had clearly expected me to argue, cry, or beg her to reconsider her decision. Instead, I continued cleaning up the kitchen, and when I was done, I poured myself a glass of wine while processing her announcement. The truth was that Allison's words didn't shatter me because I had already been grieving the loss of our marriage for months. The woman who had just announced she was done with our relationship had been emotionally absent from it for so long that her formal declaration felt more like confirmation than revelation. I had already begun the process of letting go, and her honesty about her feelings simply gave me permission to complete that process. The next morning, I called my lawyer to begin the legal process of ending our marriage. Since Allison had made her position clear, there was no point in delaying or hoping that she might change her mind. I instructed my lawyer to file the divorce papers I had been holding for months, beginning the formal dissolution of a marriage that had already ended in everything but legal status. Over the next several days, Allison seemed to be looking for opportunities to create conflict and drama that might justify her decision to end our marriage. She would pick arguments over minor household issues, criticize my parenting decisions, and make comments designed to provoke emotional reactions from me. But my therapy had prepared me for this possibility, and I remained calm and detached rather than engaging with her attempts to manufacture drama. Allison began involving friends and family members in her campaign to justify leaving our marriage, apparently telling them stories about our relationship that painted me as controlling, unsupportive, or emotionally unavailable. When mutual friends would ask me about what was happening, I simply told them that Allison had made her choice and that I respected her right to pursue happiness elsewhere. I didn't defend myself against her allegations or try to present my own version of events. What seemed to surprise Allison most was my lack of emotional response to her decision. She had apparently expected me to chase her, beg for reconciliation, or at least show signs of distress about the end of our marriage. Instead, I continued my normal routines, sleeping well, eating regularly, and going to work without any visible signs of distress or desperation. On the third day after Allison's announcement, she came home to find the divorce papers that my lawyer had served on her. Allison confronted me about the documents, apparently shocked that I had moved so quickly to formalize the end of our marriage. When she demanded an explanation for why I was rushing the process, I simply told her that she had said she was done with our marriage, and that I was respecting her wishes by making that decision legally binding. The divorce proceedings were complicated primarily by custody arrangements for Michael and Scarlett. Allison initially requested shared custody, but as the legal process progressed, it became clear that the children preferred to remain with me as their primary caregiver. They had noticed Allison's emotional distance over the past year and felt more secure in my care than in an arrangement that would require them to split time between two households. The custody evaluation process required interviews with both children, conducted by a court-appointed child psychologist who specialized in family transitions. Michael, at 13, was old enough to articulate his feelings clearly, explaining that while he loved his mother, he felt more comfortable in our family home, where routines were consistent and he didn't have to worry about his parents' relationship problems. Scarlett, though younger, expressed similar sentiments in age-appropriate language, saying she wanted to stay where she felt safest and happiest. Both children had questions about why their mother had seemed so unhappy during the months leading up to our separation, and I worked with a therapist to find ways to address their concerns without undermining their relationship with Allison. The children needed to understand that our divorce was about adult problems that had nothing to do with them, while also validating their observations about the changes in our family dynamic. Both Michael and Scarlett testified that they wanted to live with me full-time, visiting their mother on weekends and during school holidays. The court awarded me primary custody based on the children's preferences and Allison's acknowledged emotional unavailability during the past year. Allison was granted generous visitation rights, but the children would remain in our family home with me as their primary guardian. The entire divorce process took about 11 months to complete, during which Allison continued her pattern of emotional detachment while gradually adjusting to the reality that our marriage was truly ending. She moved into a downtown apartment and began building a new life that apparently aligned better with her current priorities and interests. Through my ongoing conversations with Michael and Scarlett, I learned that Allison would sometimes ask them questions about how I was doing and whether I seemed happy or sad about our divorce. They said she appeared surprised that I had adjusted so well to life as a single parent and that I didn't seem to be suffering from her absence in the way she had apparently expected. About 2 years after our divorce was finalized, Allison began making overtures about possibly reconciling our marriage when she confirmed I wasn't seeing anyone at that point. She started by asking the children to deliver messages about how much she missed our family and how she was beginning to realize that she had made a mistake in leaving. When these indirect communications didn't produce the response she was hoping for, Allison began calling me directly to discuss the possibility of giving our relationship another chance. Allison's attempts at reconciliation included apologies for her behavior during the final months of our marriage and promises that she had learned from her mistakes and was ready to prioritize our family over her career ambitions. She claimed that her experience of single life had made her appreciate what we had built together and that she wanted to work on rebuilding the trust and intimacy we had lost. But the emotional preparation I had done during the months leading up to our divorce had given me clarity about what I wanted for my future, and returning to a marriage with someone who had already demonstrated her willingness to abandon our family wasn't part of that vision. Allison had made her choice when she decided to prioritize her new job and whatever relationships it had brought into her life over her commitment to our marriage and children. When Allison persisted in her attempts to discuss reconciliation, I gave her the same quiet smile I had offered when she first announced she was done with our marriage. I told her simply that the chapter of our life together was closed, and that we both needed to focus on building new futures that aligned with our current priorities and values. Allison's reaction to my refusal to consider reconciliation revealed that she had expected to maintain some level of control over the timing and terms of our separation. She seemed genuinely surprised that I had moved on emotionally and wasn't interested in resuming a relationship that had caused both of us unhappiness during its final years. The experience of ending my marriage on my own terms, rather than being abandoned or rejected, taught me valuable lessons about self-respect and the importance of not fighting for relationships with people who have already decided they don't want to be there. Allison's announcement that she was done with our marriage had simply given me permission to complete a process of letting go that I had already begun. Looking back on the dissolution of our marriage, I realized that the months of therapy and emotional preparation I had done before Allison's announcement were crucial to my ability to handle the situation with dignity and composure. Without that foundation of self-awareness and acceptance, I might have reacted with desperation or anger that would have made the process more difficult for everyone involved, especially our children. The smile I gave Allison when she announced she was done with our marriage wasn't about happiness or satisfaction. It was about recognizing the truth of a situation I had been trying to deny for months. Sometimes, the most powerful response to someone's rejection is simply accepting it gracefully and moving forward with your life, rather than fighting for a connection that has already been broken. Allison had expected drama, conflict, and emotional chaos when she ended our marriage, perhaps as a way of validating her decision or demonstrating her importance in my life. Instead, my calm acceptance of her choice left her with a full responsibility for her decision and no one to blame for the consequences of choosing to leave a stable, loving family for whatever opportunities she thought she was pursuing. The children have adjusted well to our new family structure, and while they maintain a relationship with their mother during weekend visits, They seem more relaxed and secure in our day-to-day life than they were during the final months of our marriage, when Allison's emotional distance was creating tension in our household. My work as an engineer continues to provide both financial security and professional satisfaction, and I've been able to maintain the stable home environment that Michael and Scarlett need during their adolescent years. The absence of constant relationship stress has actually made me a more present and engaged parent, with more emotional energy to devote to their needs and interests. The experience has also taught me about the importance of trusting my instincts about relationships and not making excuses for behavior that feels wrong or hurtful. Allison's emotional withdrawal and increasing coldness were signs that our marriage was in serious trouble, and my attempts to rationalize or minimize those warning signs only prolonged a situation that was making both of us unhappy. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone go when they want to leave, rather than trying to convince them to stay in a relationship they no longer value. Allison's decision to end our marriage was ultimately the right choice for both of us, even though it took her months to realize the full implications of what she had chosen. The quiet acceptance I gave Allison when she announced she was done with our marriage represented my acceptance of a truth I had been avoiding for too long. Sometimes the end of one chapter creates space for new beginnings that are healthier, more authentic, and more aligned with who we actually are rather than who we think we should be.